Hi, good morning, everybody. One of my friends asked me in a private message, but I think it's worthwhile to talk about, and also it's a lot easier for me to make a video like this. Once I'm making the video, I might as well make it a public video. He asked me, is it true that the RCA does not accept a Satmar Gerus? RCA is the Rabbinical Council of America, which is a modern Orthodox rabbinical organization. And he was asking, is it true that they do not accept conversions that are done by the Satmar community, which is a ultra-Orthodox community originating in Hungary with some Hasidic practices. And so they're usually understood to be a type of a Hasidic community. Certainly, I would say in the classical Hasidic sense, the pre-Baal Shem Tov, Hasidei Ashkenaz sense, they certainly meld those worlds together of Hasidei Ashkenaz and the Hasidus of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh. In any event, it's neither here nor there. One thing, of course, it's a big wedge between Satmar and most of the modern Orthodox world is that the Satmar community is very unapologetically anti-Zionist, even though with a lot of other things they have much more in common, I would say, with the modern Orthodox world than the Lakewood, Litvish, even though there's Satmar in Lakewood also, but I'm saying the Litvish to Lakewood world, or even other yeshivish aspects of the Haredi community, Chofetz Chaim and Berlin, these that are maybe a little bit more modern among the Haredi world. The truth is, culturally speaking, the Satmar community has much more in common with the modern Orthodox community than it does with than the Lakewood community has with the modern Orthodox community. Other than the fact that Lakewood kind of speak English and the Satmar really don't, except the women do, and some of the men do. But beyond that, the idea of working for a living and a lot of other things are much more in line with typical modern Orthodoxy. I would say the regular American modern Orthodoxy. But again, it's neither here nor there. That's not really the point of what we're discussing. The question is, one of my rabbis who, made this point, he said it should be. He was very upset that in the Ashkenazic American world, that they didn't have essentially, you will have in a lot of the modern Orthodox synagogues rabbis who learned in Chofetz Chaim, rabbis learned in Chaim Berlin, who became rabbis in shuls, right? And you really didn't have, coming from the Satmar community, rabbis in the shuls who were serving people who were not looking for that particular flavor of Orthodoxy. It's not to say that there were not people coming out of Satmar and I'm talking about people who remain dedicated to Satmar, who didn't go and open shuls out of town. We had many people like that, but they attracted a certain flavor of people who maybe they didn't wear a shtreimel on Shabbos, but they might have wore a gartel when they're davening, things like that, and they were looking for that style because of their ancestry and so forth. Again, this question is neither here nor there. I'm already almost 5 minutes into this video without answering the question. But the question was, is it true that the RCA does not accept the conversions done by Satmar? The answer is, the RCA is not in the business of recognizing conversions. I'll repeat that because people don't understand what that means. The RCA is not in the business of recognizing conversions. It's not something that the RCA would be involved in, as far as saying a conversion that was not done under their auspices. Are the RCA as a body going to lend recognition to such a conversion or not? And so it really has nothing to do with Satmar per se. It has nothing to do with the fact that Satmar is anti-Zionist. The truth is, for a long time, on the list of yeshivas where, because the RCA has a list of yeshivas that they recognize of who could join the RCA, and for a long time they had Satmar and Bobov on the list. I don't know why they took Satmar and Bobov off the list and yet still have Chabad on the list, whereas I know a lot of RCA members who are begging that Chabad should be taken off the list and really have no issue with Satmar and Bobov being on the list, because Satmar and Bobov aren't really trying to do the type of damage to synagogue life in America that sometimes people who are coming out of Chabad are doing. I'm not blaming Chabad as a movement, but there has been a horrific rash of cases where, and I love Chabad, but instead of opening their own thing somewhere, they just go in and take over existing shuls as hostile takeovers, and they really wind up doing a lot of damage often to these shuls. It happened in Ellenville. It's happening now in Fallsburg. So we know about it firsthand in Sullivan County, what they're doing. So in any event, I'm going to get back to what we were talking about there. So the RCA will say, they don't have any business in conversions that are done outside of their auspices. And there's really no issue as far as the RCA recognizing conversions or not recognizing conversions. Now, if you're concerned with a conversion being recognized, which really should not be a concern if it's a halachic conversion. So the concern is not with the RCA, the concern is with the Rabbanut in Israel. Now, if you're a Satmar Chassid, it shouldn't really matter to you what does the RCA say, what does the Rabbanut say. And if you have a respected diet who's willing to make a gerus, why do you care what the RCA or the Rabbanut has to say? If someone wants to be part of the modern Orthodox community, and they're not part of a more liberal modern Orthodox community, I'm talking about the mainstream centrist modern Orthodoxy, the best thing to do is to go through the RCA. But the RCA is not going to put their stempel on a conversion that was done by Satmar or Bobov or anybody else. Although, again, theoretically, could somebody from Satmar be on the Bezdin with the RCA? Yes. The RCA has their what they call GPS, Gerus Protocol. I don't remember what the S stands for. I believe it's all written online. One thing that they care very much is that all three of the Dayanim should be Klei Kodesh. They're not requiring that someone has Dayanos or even Smicha to be on the Bezdin, but it should be someone who works as in the Klei Kodesh, meaning that there's a Maggid Shir, or it could be a chaplain or whatever it is. And certainly, of course, the ideal is to have 3 shul rabbanim, And even better is that they should all have dayanos. They should all be dayanim with dayanos. So, but there's no, they do not recognize gerus that was done by lay people. I would say even a koiling Raman would probably be recognized as a klei kodesh for this reason. But the truth is, and also a musmach, someone who has some sort of smicha but works as a lawyer or a doctor or something else, or a plumber or electrician, also would be, I think the RCA would recognize klei kodesh. So again, so essentially, if you have three Satmar Dayanim, the RCA is not going to say, I don't recognize this gerus. The most they would say is, it's none of our business. But if there were some need for a letter for the Rabbanut, most likely, whichever Dayan you have, whichever posik you have that would write the letter or something, you'd probably be able to get that letter written and get it recognized. But the truth is, you could have it from a lot of different, ways. My understanding is you don't really have to go through the RCA. I know the Igad Rabbanim, they have their rabbis that will write these letters and say, I recognize this gerus or that gerus, whatever, and then usually the Rabbanut will accept that, and things like that. So, with that being said, now the question is, will the Rabbanut accept the gerus from the Satmar? If everything is good, and the truth is, quite often, it's easier to get a gerus from Satmar. But part of that reason is that if someone's going to Satmar, right, for a gerus, and it's not like Satmar as an organization is doing gerus, the way that the RCA as an organization is doing gerus, my understanding is that the Hisachtus Rabbonim doesn't have a bezdin legerus, but you have Dayanim and Rabbanim who are members of the Hisachtus Rabbonim who will make a bezdin legerus. So So I'll tell you, as far as the not the Satmar in America, the Eidach Haredis, the Badats, the Eidach Haredis in Yerushalayim. So I knew someone who was Megayer with them, and the Rabbanut actually sent somebody to make sure that the Badats is doing it right. I mean, you had Rav Moshe Brandsdorfer. I don't know the other two Dayanim were. And in addition to that, Rav Moshe Sternbach, who was the Ravid of the Eidach Haredis, was there, right? Overseeing all of this and basically telling the Dayanim, this guy, he had the gerus being done. The whole hair, everything was in Yiddish, right? And then they asked him like 20 questions. He got everything right, and then they asked the question, and he just couldn't get it. And Rav Moshe Sternbach said, "It's okay. He doesn't need to know that. He's not getting smicha. He's just being Megayer." That's one thing you have to understand. Being Megayer, it's not that big of a deal. Why is it any bigger of a deal than someone being born to Jewish parents? There are just some basic main things. The most important thing in gerus is that you cannot say chutz midavar echad. You have to be mekabel the mitzvos. You have to accept the responsibility of keeping the commandments, and you cannot say, I'm accepting 612 commandments and not 613 commandments. If someone does that, the conversion is not valid. And that's really just about it. If someone converts with understanding that they're probably not going to keep all of this stuff, but they know that they have to keep it, the conversion is valid. If someone says the words in front of the Bezdin that they're accepting it, we're not mind readers. We go by what the person is saying. Conversion is valid. Now the question could be, should the Bezdin be makabel someone that they know is not going to keep? Now the other ear is the clock. There's different opinions. Some would say, well, what's the reason? The person wants to convert because even though we're not supposed to do conversions for marriage, the custom is that we do conversions for marriage. And the main thing has to be that the conversion for marriage has to be done properly. Meaning if someone is converting for the sake of marriage and doesn't mean it, and but you have to interview them and see. So one thing I always insist, if I'm converting a man, he has to have tefillin, and he has to have his own tefillin. It can't be like he's going to borrow tefillin from someone else. I had one guy, he said he'll borrow tefillin from someone else till he gets his own. I said, get your own first, then you come back. So basically, that's the answer what I have. Again, I didn't mean this video to be so long, but it's that is what it is. Now, so certainly then, when the Rabbanut was sending people to oversee the conversion done by the Badats, so the Rabbanut accepted the Badat's conversion. I think now they'll say, if you request that, I think at one point the Rabbanut was insisting that every time the Badats did a conversion, the Rabbanut had to send an agent to make sure to kind of give their approval. I think at this point now it's something you can request, or maybe not even request. I don't even really quite know how that works nowadays. Again, this is a story going back almost 20 years ago. So what does that mean? At least 15 years ago. So can you get so that's really what it comes down to. The RCA recognizing conversion or not it doesn't matter at all. What matters theoretically, if you care about that, doesn't matter in the eyes of God. And if you're living in Williamsburg, which happens to be the person asking me is living in Williamsburg, it's hard to say that most Williamsburg Dayanim will say that they're not going to accept the conversion done by the RCA. But if you're from a very verfrumte, I know this particular person has a shaykhis to very frumer rabbonim. I think if someone wants to be part of that community, anybody who's converting should always just convert with the community that they're planning to be part of. That's really how it's supposed to be. I remember talking to Rabbi Mark Angel, who is known for being very liberal in conversions, and I had a case where I felt like I didn't want to take this case because it wasn't my Masorah like that. And at this point, I would have, although it didn't. In the end, it didn't work out. It was all in the Shemayim. But I talked to Rabbi Angel, and he said, "Why should he get in. I was a Rav in Richmond, Virginia. He said, why should he, as a rabbi in Manhattan, get involved with a conversion in Richmond, Virginia? He told me, you're the rabbi of your community, of your shul. You do it yourself. And I said, well, who else is on your Bezdin? He said, I got guys in the shul. They're on the Bezdin, and that's what we do. And that's how it always was done, and certainly in America, for decades and decades. Not only that, but most of the modern Orthodox rabbis would recognize conservative conversions. And then a lot of things came up that had nothing to do with halacha. It all came up with politics. And that's what it really is coming down to. And the same issue here. This is a political question, not a halachic question. Halachically speaking, according to the Ramah, you can have Gimel Hadyotos. The same type of Bezdin you could have for Hataras Nedorim on Erev Rosh Hashanah, you could have for Geirus. And if the person says in front of the Bezdin, they're the Mekabel the mitzvahs, and then after that they go and the next Shabbos they're driving in the car, although there are poskim who question such a thing, the Beis Yitzchok is the main one, but nonetheless, that's a das yochid. The simple meaning of what Chazal say, what the Shulchan Aruch says, is that a choizer l'suroi, he remains a Jew, and he has a din of Yisrael Mumar, which is a lot worse than being, there's nothing wrong being a Gentile. There's something very bad to be a Yisrael Mumar, to be a Jewish heretic, a Jewish apostate. And that's one big reason why, a person wants to be Megayer has to think twice. If this is what you really want, we'll do it. We shouldn't. I don't think that the Rabbonim Dayanim should be playing God and saying, well, we are going to keep you if this is what you really want and this and that. That's not really, even though there is a concept of the din of the ger, and the Dayanim have to be done something. They do have to pass some kind of a judgment, but that judgment should be rather simple. It's not just a ceremonial thing. It's that they're making a din, but the din is not a very difficult din. The judgment, it's not something that takes that much expertise, so I'm talking halachically speaking. I understand the politics, and I don't think the politics are right. And the biggest proof of the political issue is this: what you're asking is that you have the frummest, right? The Satmar people are like, I don't know, because they're not from our club. That's just silly, And the thing is, the Satmar, they don't do that. They don't say we're not going to recognize. I'm saying for the most part, I've been on Batei Din where you had a Satmar with a Yid who was a Beneshek, but who was looked like a Misnachel with a big knitted yarmulke and the payas behind his ears. So that's how it works. Alright, I've already slept on too much. Thank you for watching. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe, comment, and we'll see you all later.